Welcome to Midweek Reflections. It's really good to have you along again. This week my theme is neighbourhood and serving God in the places that we find ourselves. Because let's face it, most of our life is lived in the canvas of our suburbs, whether it's an apartment in Meadowbank or Rhodes, a duplex in North Epping, or Beecroft and Gabby, Pennant Hills. We all come from different areas and suburbs, and the things that are different about each one, but the thing that remains the same is that they are the place that we are called to live out our relationship with Jesus. The neighbourhood is a really important context for discipleship. You know, ever since John 1:14 said, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us," or the Word became flesh and literally tabernacled among us, or as the Message says, the Word became flesh and blood and moved into our neighbourhood. In Jesus we have a God who says that the world is not God forsaken, that he's actually here. And the way that he's here is through his people, or one of the significant ways. And we're called to love our neighbours. Jesus said the first two commandments are to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, strength and soul. And the second is like it, to love our neighbour as we love ourselves. See, Epping Baptist is a large program church. We like to run events, and one of the things we can't do right now is run large events, but that doesn't mean mission has stopped. God's still present in our neighbourhood. And there is this thing in our culture where Jesus says, love your neighbour. Well, we go, well, it doesn't just mean your neighbour, but which is true, it means many more people than just our physical neighbours, but it doesn't mean it's not your next door neighbour. You know, it's not our neighbourhoods. We can't be always on the way to somewhere else. You know, we need to live in the present and try and serve Jesus in the present. There's so much ministry. We have these neat programs, but I reckon there's a huge place for staying close to Jesus, you know, growing in your faith. So that's kind of step one. Out of that, you'll have thoughts and impressions and ideas that come maybe for ministry. It's worth talking with a few others and not going out on your own, because we're meant to be a church, right? A community. And then it's worth teaming up in mission to do stuff like have a crack, follow through. Don't let just good intentions be the end of things. Take a little step of faith and see where it leads, and then take the next step, and then take the next step, and expect that God is at work before you. See, our Father is at work in the world. He loves people more than we do, I'm sure of it. But so much of mission is stepping out into a place or into someone's lives where God is already at work. So then we partner with him as people made in his image, being renewed in the image of Christ, to see God's purposes in that human life, in that family, in that household, in that international student, in that work colleague, to see them come to know and experience Jesus for themselves. Who knows where that might end up. So anyway, this week's Reflections is all about the neighbourhood. So I'll be jumping in the car and going to visit the Hancocks, and I want to talk a little bit about what faith looks like for them as they live in a neighbourhood, as they work, and so we'll do that. And then we'll probably finish off with a recipe. A few people said they've missed the recipe, so I'll throw that in there. So hang in there. I love chatting with the Hancocks. We had a guest appearance by their dog, which was fantastic as well. So that's coming up next. week we're taking EBC people profiles on the road, and we're at Mark and Jan Hancock's place. So it's so good to be here. Thanks for having us, Mark and Jan.
Thanks, Nath. Welcome.
Can you tell us how you ended up at Epping Baptist Church?
Sure. I guess I'll go first because I was at Epping Baptist first. So I think it was in year 11 or 12 at high school. I'd been going to Beecroft Uniting Church, but then a friend at church was looking for a church home, and I wasn't particularly, settled where I was. So yeah, we just started looking around, and actually Epping Baptist Church was the first church we went to, and I've been there pretty much since then. Wow. So yeah. I won't tell you how many years ago that was, but it's a long time ago. Yeah.
I moved to Sydney to study for university, and moved to Epping because I knew people in the area, and I'd actually gone to school in that area. And I met Mark at uni, and he said, come along to Epping Baptist, and that's how it started.
So how did your journeys of faith begin?
You go first.
It's interesting. I think as growing up in a non-Christian household, I had a really positive relationship with a scripture teacher through primary school. And I didn't become a Christian then, but then when I went to high school, I formed a friendship with a girl who was a Christian, and ended up becoming a Christian through her witness. And interestingly, when we were up on the Central Coast, my scripture teacher from primary school, who really sowed the seed for me, ended up going to my church. So we reconnected, which was really lovely.
Oh, wow. Yeah. How about you?
Similar in that not really a Christian family, although my grandfather is a minister, but Dad's always been kind of interested, open to the church, almost encouraged me to go, but never really went to church, etc. So it's funny kind of looking back on it. There was no one-off, particular incident. Went to youth group as a child, and then just gradually connected, as I said, with his church at, kind of 16 or 17 years old at Beecroft, and then across to Epping.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your day jobs? So if I was to meet you between Monday and Friday, what would I find you doing? Yeah.
Go for it, Jen.
I'm a physiotherapist. We're both physiotherapists. I work particularly in paediatrics. So I work with children typically with disability and complex medical needs. And so I spend my time, sometimes I'm in the clinic, sometimes I'm in the community, going to their homes or to their schools, so working really closely with their families. I also do a little bit of teaching at the university as well in paediatrics, and supervising students, and it could be here, there or anywhere.
I'm a physio as well, as Jen said. So I worked as a clinical physio for probably 10 or 12 years or so, primarily, and then transitioned into an academic career. So, teaching and doing research for the next 5 or 10 years. And now I pretty much only work, as an academic physio. So just seeing very few patients, but just one or two here and there. So what does that mean in a normal week? It's a kind of mixed role, which I really love. So heaps and heaps of varieties. So some of it's teaching, coordinating units, preparing, physio curriculum. So I'm at Macquarie Uni, so I was at Sydney for quite a long time before that, but now at Macquarie we started a program about 6 or 7 years ago. So there's the teaching part and then doing research. They're the main parts of our job.
It sounds like your workplaces are really personal and tactile. What effect did COVID-19 have on your work?
Yeah, I think for me it's been a bit of a roller coaster. So when initially COVID came on the scene and everything sort of shut down, we had to withdraw our hands-on services. So we went completely to a telehealth model, and working with kids over a Zoom meeting is quite tricky. But also, supporting families to do the things that we would be doing with their children was difficult, but empowering for the families too. I think missed the contact with families, and it's a real privilege in what I do to be so intimately involved with these families in their homes, working really closely with their family unit, and so we've gone back now to that model, obviously taking very stringent precautions around hygiene, which we would normally do anyway, but I think patients and families, my kids are complex and vulnerable, so I do worry about them.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess big picture, Nath, I think there's the part of our jobs normally, and they are kind of special jobs, which we do talk about at Bible study and other times, that it's a really kind of lovely opportunity in our jobs to really connect with people, because you do meet people at their most vulnerable. So years ago I worked in a spinal cord injury unit, and it's pretty amazing working with people when they've been through such a devastating kind of injury, and you spend more time with those people than anybody else at that time point. So I think physio is a lovely opportunity to really connect with people. I bumped into patients 10 years later who still remember you and come up and talk to you, and Emma gets all embarrassed, so it's kind of nice like that. And then teaching is the same, so you walk an interesting journey with people, just get an insight into the challenges in so many people's lives. So it's, I really do love that element, and the students are our students, and 3 years later they're our colleagues, and 5 years later they're working with you, so it's really lovely, and that big community that you kind of feel part of as that. So but in terms of COVID, it's been quite interesting for us in many ways. Obviously, physio teaching, some of it is intellectual knowledge based, but a lot of it is manual technical skills that I teach. So that was really challenging. So trying to find bizarre ways to teach that via Zoom and things, knowing that we couldn't really do all of it, but we could teach a lot of the reasoning and decision making, and in a weird way that worked quite well. But as restrictions have eased a little bit, we're now doing some face-to-face, hands-on kind of stuff. So, again, it's a whole new world of getting used to doing that with masks and talking through masks and stuff, which I find really difficult. But we have actually got back to teaching some technical skills, but it's a much, much smaller component of the degree than it used to be.
Yeah. People talk about COVID-19 as like being in the wilderness and stripping back and revealing kind of the most basic things about faith. What have you learned about God and church through this period?
It was interesting. I actually drive past the church quite a lot, and every time I drive past, I think I really miss being in the building. And I mean, it's not the building, it's the people. So I think how important our church family is has really struck me. I think, we've continued our life group over this time, and we're meeting via Zoom, and which is great. And occasionally, I might have a coffee with one of the members, or, catch up with someone else. And I think it's really highlighted for me the importance of the fellowship, and, just praying for each other and sharing, what's going well, what's not going well. I think that's been a bit of just a reminder of how important that is. And I think really thinking, people who don't know God in a time like this, where you just, you're holding on to those burdens and not realizing that, God's got a plan. Whatever comes, He's in control, and being able to let that go. So, I think it makes me really feel for people who don't know that surety.
Thank you.
By the way, if we're looking distracted, it's because our dog is walking around on the floor here and licking Nath. So Ollie's been one of the best things about COVID. But we'll talk
COVID
about that.
puppy.
Yeah.
Ollie!
I hate doing things.
That's all right, I don't need him anymore.
No, that's fine. Okay. Yeah, so COVID's been really interesting in many ways. I guess, interestingly, for me, whilst I love my work, it's almost the biggest challenge in my faith walk as well, because it can be too much of my focus and too much of my time and my energy, I guess. So COVID's been quite nice because, we were forced to slow down at least a little bit, and being home was really lovely. You know, I really connect with God in the outdoors and nature. And so just being home and doing simple things, you know, Emma was home and Jan, and go and sit outside, even if it was just for 5 or 10 minutes in the sun, and just, so just that, I guess that obvious thing we talk about, but a focus on the really simple things in life, family, the world, you know, all that stuff. So that was really lovely. Our puppy Ollie, just spending time, just enjoying those kind of really simple things. And I guess just an awareness, you know, when we talk about our missionary field, of the opportunities at work, which I've always been aware of, but they're even more evident at this time. There's challenges at university at the moment. You know, there's voluntary redundancies and probably forced redundancies going around. So just realizing the opportunities, I guess, to support the people that are with you every day, and thinking of that as a real opportunity.
Well, thanks so much, guys, for letting me come to your house and meet your new dog.
Hey, Ollie.
Ollie, do you want to come and say hello? Ollie, come here. Come here. Good boy. Come on. Come here. Oh. Do you want to say hello to everybody?
G'day, mate.
Say hi.
Hi.
Say, I'm a lot of trouble.
Right, well, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nate.
All good.
All good.
Hello there, I'm going to show you the process of putting together Anzac Biscuits. Ingredients: 1 1/4 cups of rolled oats, cup of desiccated coconut, 3/4 cup of sugar, 1/2 cup of plain flour, 3/4 cup of SR flour, self-raising flour, about 125 grams of cooking marge, 2 tablespoons of golden syrup, and 1 teaspoon of carb soda. That's the ingredients. The cooking marge and the golden syrup into the saucepan and onto the stove. Then mix all the dry ingredients: oats, desiccated coconut, sugar, plain flour. Now you need to be careful. Recently I put the plain flour into the sugar bowl instead of into the mixing bowl, and we had a bit of a mess to make up, and then mix together. You wait until the margarine melts. And I forgot to mention, you also need 2 tablespoons of boiling water in which you put it into the and then mix that in there, and then over it goes into the and that is all mixed together. All mixed, ready to go. Trays that have been greased up before you put it in. I like to use the teaspoon that we used to use when my kids were growing up, the baby spoon, and it works well for me. And then you put each of these out. So the stove goes to 150 degrees Celsius. By the time I've set these out, it'll be warmed up enough to put them in. And so they're cooked. So now a taste test. Not bad. Done better, but see how you go with it. The credits. First of all, the recipe itself comes from First World War days, when mums and wives were able to send cooked biscuits overseas to wherever their family member might have been serving, and they were able to do that without no detriment to the biscuits. It was Taylor Thigstone that helped put it together for me, all the production and the filming and editing it. And the apron I'm wearing, it was given to me as a Christmas present when I was with the Methodist or Uniting Church at 139 Castlereagh Street. My colleague Jan, her daughter, made it for me, and it's been a good memory from back then. Thanks very much. Enjoy making some biscuits. Bye.